first verse again. We're going to share in a song of testimony. It's 852 in your songbook. And the first verse says, I want to tell you what God has done through Christ, his well-beloved Son. And my poor heart he sought and won. Can you wonder that I want to tell it? I invite you to stand as we sing this song straight through. I'd like to read the third verse to you, even though we're struggling with the singing of it. They're words that I think you should hear today. What God has done for others, He still can do. That bears repeating. What God has done, He still can do. His power confession lives anew. And all who trust Him find Him true. Can you wonder that I want to tell it? I want to tell of that glad day for which we watch, for which we pray. It must be near, not far away. Can you wonder that I want to tell it? Well, this is, as I said, a testimony song, and it's Richard who has been chosen to give his personal testimony this evening. And there are many things that I could say about my experience with the Lord. I can't tell you them all, and neither will I. But I just want to say to you that I grew up in the church, in the Salvation Army. And as a young boy, I attended just about every function that took place here in church. And as I got older, went off to school, church got less and less. And I started following paths of my own making. And perhaps that was good, because I learned a lot of things during those times that helped me make a decision for Christ. Back in the 80s, I had the opportunity to go into men's camp. And it was one of those times when the Spirit of God was moving in that place. And I remember sitting down in the middle of the congregation when people were responding to the voice of God. And like many times before, I didn't have to ask the question, is the Spirit of God real? Because He was speaking to my heart at that time. And in fact, I got lost in the presence of the Lord. And did I go forward? No. But I just sat there in the chair and I spoke with God and I asked His forgiveness. And at a later time when I came back here, I made a public confession of that at the Mercy Seat. And you know, okay, that was my part. God's part happened long before that, because long before the creation began, God looked forward to that day. He looked forward to this evening now. I like to reflect on that, and I've mentioned it a good many times, because He knew that each of us would be into this sanctuary tonight. And He knew that I would be giving my personal testimony. I was able to respond to the voice of God because the voice of God was calling me through His Spirit. And maybe many of you have experienced that. I was a fortunate person. I was fortunate because God's Spirit was calling. Because there were lots of times that God's Spirit called and I didn't respond. So I was privileged that I had that chance to exercise my will. You see, God made it possible in creation when He placed in me something that I did not deserve. It was the grace of God, and He gave me what is referred to as saving grace. That ability to say yes to God. And so that left it up to me to make that choice. And so I made it, and God saved me. Did He make me perfect? Ask Christine. Not perfect. Not close to perfect. But saved. Not close to perfect, but saved. Going to heaven one of these days. I'd like to think that I'm closer to being perfect than I was on that day when I gave my heart to the Lord. And I know that tomorrow I will be closer to that state of perfection. And so I'm living a life for God. Is it always visible? I doubt it. But it is my desire, my wish, to be in God's favor, to have a listening ear, to have the will to respond to what He has to say. So the question is not, what am I going to be? What am I today? Questions are not that. The question is, how do God treat me in these days? Many things I cannot describe to you. But I know that many times I've been in services like this, and all of a sudden someone gets up and gives a testimony, or somebody sings a song. And the words of the song speak to my heart. And tears fill my eyes. Because all of a sudden I'm reminded that it's not just me here, it's not just the rest of the congregation, but it's the Spirit of God that is speaking to my heart. And one time, you know, when that would happen to me in church services, I would try to hide it, because I would be filling up emotionally. I since have put that aside through the help of God. I think it was Bertha one time told me, how come you're not saved? I'll tell you why you're not saved. You're too proud. Too proud to be saved. She was right. I knew she was right. And so down through the years, I've watched the hand of God just reveal Him all around us. I remember being out in the old school, and there was a meeting on the go, and the meeting was, will we build a new church, or will we repair the old one? And to make a long story short, we all had different opinions. It didn't matter, because God was at work. You know, I've got a little booklet at home, a small booklet that's typed, rather than done on computer, as we say. And that little booklet tells about the first missionary that came on the North Shore. And in there it tells about when he came to Island Cove. And he met with a group of people. The intent was to start a church. And so they all agreed at that time to start a church. And the book goes on to say the next year the missionary came back to see what progress was on the go. And nothing had occurred. And he commented the people were too poor at that time to be able to start a church. Well, you know the history beyond that. The history is the church got built. And the Methodist movement started here in Island Cove. And now we find ourselves in 2019. Many changes in the spiritual community over those years. We were in a position with the old church, and you'll say, oh, how is this a testimony? We were in a position with the old church where we didn't know what to do. The church didn't have the modern facilities in it, and we couldn't afford to do much. But we got a building. And when I say we got a building, I mean we were given a building, a new church. Given it in part because $2 for every one. A new church here. The hand of God. We couldn't see at that time how we could do it. We couldn't see how we could do it, but God could see. We had to trust. Then came the day that we had 50-odd children in Sunday school. 7 classes, I remember. 1 room, and you'd go out in the kitchen or in the little room. There was a copy room at the time. And we decided to expand. How could we do it? Why should we do it? And to make a long story short, we expanded. Where did the money come from? The hand of God for the most part. Some He provided to us, others through the church, dollar for dollar. Hand of God. we decided we were going to build a quarters, or plan to build a quarters. Because the old one was getting deteriorated. Guess how much our quarters cost us? $10,000. Amazing, we never thought it. We thought we were silly to put it into quote. And of God. So all down through my Christian life, I've been able to look at God's hand working. Tell you another little story. I guess my time is up now. When I was in university, I decided that I should do a master's program. And I went to Nova Scotia. That was a miracle in itself. And I'll just say that I didn't have my money in, the time was up, the day that I talked up there. A strange lady paid my fee. The hand of God. Nothing I did. When I came home that summer, that I went to first summer, someone said, you should do some courses in Memorial. And the trouble with Memorial is, I wasn't a student there anymore. So I had to make an application. Left Island Cove, went to St. John's, and went over to the Arts Administration, tried to register. You're too late. You're too late, and the registration is finished as of this week. And you can't apply and get it back. So I gave it up, and I walked around for a little while. Were you with me then, Christine? No. I went over to another room right by the wicket, and somebody came along and talked to me, and they said, what are you doing? And I told them my disappointment that I couldn't do a course there in the fall. And she said, you come with me. And she chatted with me for a little while, and she said, you go home. That Thursday was registration day. And she said, by Thursday the next week, she said, you will have your permit to register in the mail. Impossible as far as the registration people were concerned. And so Wednesday came, no registration permit. Thursday came, no permit. So Thursday night was registration. And so what was I going to do? At that time I was living in Island Cove, and I left and I went to St. John's, and I stood in the lineup, and at that time I was down in the tunnels. And we walked up, and a friend I met there, and they were saying, you can't get money in Mont. You know, they won't help you in anything, and that's all. And when I got to the first checkpoint, so for those of you who are not familiar, there are many checkpoints. And I got to the first checkpoint, and the man said, we're going into the Thompson Student Center. And he said, where's your permit to register? I don't have. Excuse me. And at that time, I said to him, I said, there's a lady in there doing registration, and her name is Mackenzie. Could you tell her that I'm out here? And he did that for me. He went in, and the next thing she came out, and she said, you didn't get your permit? I said, no. Well, she said, you come with me. And she left her desk where she was registering people, and she took me over to the administration building. She had the keys. We went into the office, and we searched boxes that were ready to be mailed. In one of those boxes was my permit to register. We went back to the lineup, and I got up in the lineup again, And she said, no, come with me. And we went through that checkpoint and the next one, right up to the desk where the registration for graduate courses were. And the other thing that I forgot to tell you was, two things I had to have: permit to register and permission from the dean at university to do a course there, because I was now a student in St. Francis Xavier University. And you know something? Under this, permission from the dean. Anything I did? Not at all. Something that she did? Yeah, she had a part. But there was a greater part, I believe. Because I can tell you story after story like that, where the hand of God was there. So I've learned through the years not to worry too much about the future, and to trust God. We don't know what the future will bring, but we know that there's one who knows the future, who's one who created the future. So for me, what does the future bring? I don't know. But one thing I've learned to do is look for a door. And if the door opens, go through the door. Trust God for the rest. You might not have what it takes. God has what it takes. So when I thought about my testimony, there were certain things that I thought I might say. And I said, no, you know, everyone needs to know that God does not just give you saving grace, that each one of us here has. Whether we've used it or not, each one of us has the saving grace, the ability to be saved. Because God did that. That was His favor to us that we didn't deserve. And what I've learned, that each day now He gives me a new kind of grace. And it's a sustaining grace. Something that when times you look around and things seem dismal, that you can trust God. You don't have to know what the future is going to be. You know, in this church, this past spring, we were in a dismal spot. We didn't know if we were really going to have a church this fall. Didn't understand how it could be solved. But we're here worshiping tonight. Will we be here worshiping next year? Listen, trust God. Trust God. It may not be. But whatever God has in mind when He opens the door, we have to be ready to go through. There's, I'd just like to read this little portion of Scripture that I have here. It's from Psalms, Gospel, not Gospel, from Psalms 119, and I'll just read a couple of verses, starting at verse 44. And the psalmist says, "So shall I keep your law continually, forever and forever. I will walk at liberty, at freedom, because I have that peace. I have that freedom of trusting in God, knowing that He's not going to harm me. I might not see it at any one point in time, but I can trust Him. But I walk in a freedom that doesn't burden me down, but helps me to have faith in God. And I will walk at liberty, for I seek your precepts. I will speak of your testimonies also before kings. I will not be ashamed, and I will delight myself in your commandments, which I love. My hands also I will lift up to your commandments, which I love, and I will meditate on your statutes. And that's my desire, and that's my goal, to seek out the things of God, to roll them around in my mind, to grow in His likeness, and to do His will. Now there was